Let me ask you something. When was the last time you stayed up late? Not because you had to, but because you couldn't stop. When was the last time something grabbed hold of you so completely that hours vanished and you looked up to find dawn breaking through your window? I'm not talking about binge-watching shows or scrolling through your phone. I'm talking about creation, about being so consumed by an idea, a problem, a possibility that everything else falls away. Because here's what I've learned after decades of building things, breaking things, and building them again. The world has become obsessed with efficiency, with doing things faster, smarter, cheaper, with finding the shortest path from A to B, with measuring everything in terms of return on investment, time saved, energy conserved. And I get it. Efficiency matters. Time is finite. We all want to work smarter, not harder. But somewhere along the way, we forgot something essential. We forgot about passion. We forgot about obsession. We forgot that every single thing that changed the world, every innovation that mattered, came from people who couldn't stop thinking about it, people who lay awake at night, people who called each other at crazy hours because an idea just hit them and it couldn't wait until morning. You can't schedule innovation for 9 to 5. You can't put passion on a timesheet. Take me back to 1979. I was 24 years old and Apple was growing fast, maybe too fast. We'd created the Apple II and it was selling beyond our wildest dreams. We were becoming a real company with real employees, real offices, real problems. One day I got invited to visit Xerox PARC, Palo Alto Research Center. You might not know this place, but in the late 70s, it was where the future was being invented. Xerox had assembled some of the brightest minds in computing, and they were working on things that seemed like science fiction. I walked into that building thinking I'd seen everything. I'd been in this business for years. I understood computers, or so I thought. Then they showed me something that stopped my heart, a graphical user interface, windows, icons, a mouse. The computer wasn't just a blinking cursor on a black screen anymore. It was visual, it was intuitive, it was alive. I stood there watching the demo and I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. This was it. This was the future. Not a future, the future. And Xerox, for all their brilliance, didn't seem to understand what they had. Here's what happened in that moment. Everything changed, not gradually, not over time. In an instant, I knew that we had to build this. We had to bring this to the world. Nothing else mattered. Did I go home at 5 o'clock that day? Number. Did I think, well, that's interesting, I'll consider it during business hours? Hell no. I was obsessed, consumed, possessed. I called everyone I knew. I dragged engineers to come see it. I woke people up in the middle of the night to tell them what I'd seen, because when you witness something that's going to change everything, you don't wait for the right time to share it. You can't wait. The idea is burning inside you. So we started building the Macintosh. Not a product, a revolution. We put together a team of the most talented, most passionate, most slightly crazy people we could find, artists and engineers, rebels and dreamers. We hung a pirate flag over our building, literally, a skull and crossbones, because we weren't just another division of Apple. We were pirates. We were going to break the rules, challenge the status quo, do things that couldn't be done. People thought we were insane. A pirate flag in a corporate office? But that flag meant something. It meant we weren't going to work like everyone else. We weren't going to think like everyone else. We weren't going to accept limitations that others accepted. The hours we worked, forget about it. There were no hours. There was only the work, the mission, the thing we were building. Was it because I forced them? Because I cracked the whip and demanded they sacrifice their lives? Number. You can't force that kind of dedication. You can't mandate passion. You can't schedule obsession. It was because they cared. They believed. They were as consumed by the vision as I was. When someone figured out how to make the interface smoother, they didn't wait until the next morning to share it. They called. They came in. They gathered around the screen at midnight to look at the new code, the new design, the new possibility. I remember this engineer, I won't name names, but brilliant guy. He came into the office on a Sunday morning. Not because there was a deadline, not because anyone told him to. He came in because he'd woken up at 3 a.m. with an idea for how to reduce the boot time by 5 seconds, and he couldn't go back to sleep until he'd tried it. 5 seconds. To most people, that's nothing. Who cares about 5 seconds? But to him, to us, those 5 seconds mattered, because we cared about every detail, every pixel, every moment of the user's experience. That's what passion looks like. That's what obsession looks like. It doesn't watch the clock. It doesn't count hours. It doesn't calculate the minimum effort required to get by. But let me tell you something else. Let me tell you about the dark side of obsession, because passion without wisdom is just destruction waiting to happen. Around this same time, there was another project at Apple called Lisa. It was supposed to be the next big thing, before the Mac. I was leading it initially, and I was difficult. No, let me be honest. I was impossible. I pushed people too hard. I demanded perfection, but gave them no grace. I confused passion with cruelty. I thought that caring deeply meant never accepting anything less than my vision, even if that vision was unrealistic or harmful. And eventually, they took me off the Lisa project. They essentially fired me from my own team. Can you imagine that? I was Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, and my own company decided I was too toxic to lead this project. It hurt. God, it hurt. Not just my ego, though that too, but deeper, because I realized I'd lost sight of something important. Passion is supposed to elevate people, not crush them. Obsession is supposed to create, not destroy. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I'd become a monster. If my intensity, which I thought was my strength, was actually my fatal flaw. If caring so deeply about the work meant I'd stopped caring about the people doing the work. I want you to understand this because it's crucial. Passion without empathy is just selfishness. Obsession without consideration is just tyranny. You can be intense, you can be demanding, you can refuse to accept mediocrity, but you have to remember that the people around you are human beings, not just instruments of your vision. That was a hard lesson. One I'm not sure I fully learned until much later. Maybe I never fully learned it, but I tried. I kept trying. Here's what I know now, looking back on all of it, the great products, the disasters, the triumphs, the failures. We're living in an age where everyone wants the result without the process. Everyone wants the innovation without the obsession. Everyone wants the breakthrough without the sleepless nights. They want to optimize their time. They want to find the most efficient path. They want to calculate exactly how much effort is required and not give 1 ounce more. And I'm telling you, that's not how anything great gets made. The iPhone didn't come from someone working exactly 40 hours a week and then going home. It came from people who obsessed over every detail, who argued about the curve of the screen at midnight, who redesigned the entire interface 3 months before launch because it wasn't quite right. The Mac didn't come from people who watched the clock. It came from pirates who raised their flag and said, "We're going to change the world, and we don't care if it takes all night." Apple's retail stores, which everyone said would fail, didn't come from focus groups and market research. They came from people who walked through prototype stores at 2 a.m., moving shelves inches to the left, adjusting lighting, obsessing over every aspect of the experience. You know what the difference is between a good product and a great product? Between a job and a calling? Between work and passion? It's that phone call at 10:30 p.m. It's that moment when someone on your team has an idea, maybe a small idea, maybe a crazy idea, and they can't wait until tomorrow to share it. They have to call. They have to tell someone. They have to explore it now, tonight, this moment. That's where innovation comes from, not from scheduled brainstorming sessions, not from quarterly strategic planning meetings, not from efficiency consultants telling you how to optimize your workflows. It comes from people who care so much about what they're building that time becomes irrelevant, that the line between work and life blurs not because they're being exploited, but because they're doing something they love. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That's easy for you to say, Steve. You were building Apple. You had something world-changing to work on. What about the rest of us? What about people doing normal jobs, working for normal companies without some grand vision? Fair question. And here's my answer. It's not about the scale of what you're working on. It's about whether you care. I've known people who brought that level of passion to teaching, to cooking, to writing, to building furniture, to fixing cars, to designing gardens. The work itself doesn't have to be revolutionary. Your approach to it can be, the question isn't, am I changing the world? The question is, am I giving everything I have to what I'm doing right now? Because here's the truth. Most people never find their calling. Not because it doesn't exist, but because they're not willing to invest enough of themselves to discover it. They want to know if something is their passion before they commit. They want a guarantee of return before they make the investment. But it doesn't work that way. You don't find your passion and then work hard. You work hard and then discover your passion in the process. You commit first. You obsess first. You care first. And then maybe you find that thing that makes you want to call someone at 10:30 p.m. I'm not saying everyone should work 80-hour weeks. I'm not saying you should destroy your health or your relationships or your life in pursuit of some goal. That's the mistake I made, and it took me years to understand it. What I'm saying is, whatever you're doing, do it fully. Be present. Care deeply. Don't watch the clock. Don't count the hours. Don't calculate the minimum viable effort, because the minimum viable effort gets you minimum viable results. And minimum viable results don't change anything. They don't create anything. They don't mean anything. Let me tell you about something that happened when we were developing the first Apple Store. Everyone, and I mean everyone, told us it was a terrible idea. We were a computer company. Why would we open retail stores? Gateway had tried it and failed. Retail was dying. We'd lose hundreds of millions of dollars. But I had this vision. I wanted people to experience Apple products the way we intended them to be experienced. Not in some big box store with disinterested salespeople, but in a space designed specifically for exploration, for learning, for falling in love with technology. We built a prototype store in a warehouse, a full-scale mock-up, And we spent months walking through it, adjusting it, reimagining it, moving things by inches, changing the lighting, rethinking the flow. One night, and I remember this clearly, it was probably 11 p.m., and Ron Johnson, who was leading the retail initiative, called me. "Steve," he said, "I think we've got it wrong." "What do you mean?" I was exhausted. We'd been working on this for months. We were about to launch. The layout. We organized everything by product. Macs over here, iPods over there, but that's not how people think. They don't think in products, they think in what they want to do. Music, photos, movies. We need to reorganize the entire store around activities, not products. He was right. It meant starting over. It meant months more work. It meant delaying the launch. We did it anyway, because that's what you do when you care. You don't say, "Well, we've invested too much time already." You don't say, "That's not in the budget." You don't say, "Let's just launch what we have and fix it later." You say, "Let's get it right." And Ron didn't call me at 11 p.m. because I demanded it. He called because he couldn't not call. The realization had hit him, and it was too important to wait. That's passion. That's obsession. That's what creates something great. I think about young people today, and I'm including a lot of people my age who've adopted this mindset, and I see something troubling. I see people who want to optimize everything, who want to find the hack, the shortcut, the efficient path. They ask, "What's the minimum I need to do to get the job?" instead of, "What's the maximum I can contribute?" They think, "I've put in my hours, I've done what's required," instead of, "Is this actually good? Does this actually matter? Would I be proud to put my name on this?" They're calculating their effort like it's a currency, spending exactly enough to get the return they want and not a penny more. And look, I understand the logic. We live in a world that often doesn't reward extra effort. That takes advantage of passionate people. That exploits dedication. I get why people are cynical, but here's what they don't understand. They're cheating themselves. They're optimizing their way to mediocrity. They're efficiently achieving nothing remarkable, because remarkable doesn't come from doing the required amount. Remarkable comes from caring so much that required becomes meaningless, from being so engaged that you don't think about what's required or what's optimal. You just do what needs to be done to make it great. You think I built Apple by calculating the minimum viable effort? You think the iPhone exists because someone said, "Let's do just enough to ship a product"? Number. It exists because there were people who were willing to argue about pixel placement at midnight, who were willing to throw out months of work and start over because it wasn't quite right, who called each other late at night because they'd had a breakthrough and couldn't wait to share it. But let me be clear about something, though. I'm not romanticizing burnout. I'm not glorifying unhealthy work habits. I'm not saying you should sacrifice your family, your health, your sanity for your job. In fact, it's the opposite. When you're truly passionate about something, it doesn't feel like sacrifice. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like play, like exploration, like the most natural thing in the world. The people who stayed up late working on the Mac, they weren't martyrs. They were having the time of their lives. They were creating something they believed in. They were part of something bigger than themselves. That's the distinction that's so important. Forced overtime is exploitation. Passionate engagement is something entirely different. One drains you. The other energizes you. One is imposed from outside. The other comes from within. The question you need to ask yourself is, what would make you so excited that you'd want to call someone at 10:30 p.m. to share an idea? What would make you lose track of time? What would make you forget to look at the clock? If you can't answer that, you haven't found your thing yet, and that's okay, but you need to keep looking. You need to keep trying different things. You need to keep exposing yourself to new possibilities, because a life spent watching the clock is no life at all. A career spent calculating the minimum effort is a waste of your potential. You have so much more to give than that, so much more to create, so much more to discover about what you're capable of. I've been accused of being too intense, too demanding, too uncompromising, and you know what? Those accusations are probably fair. I've made mistakes. I've hurt people. I've let my passion turn into something darker at times. But I'll tell you what I've never done. I've never phoned it in. I've never done just enough to get by. I've never looked at something I created and thought, it's good enough. And because of that refusal to accept mediocrity, we changed the world. We created products that 1 billion people use every day. We proved that technology could be beautiful. We showed that innovation doesn't have to be complicated or confusing. Was it worth it? The long hours, the stress, the failures along the way, the relationships I damaged, the health issues I developed? I don't know. That's an honest answer. I don't know. There were costs, real costs, and I'm not telling you those costs don't matter. What I'm telling you is this. At the end of your life, you won't regret the times you stayed up late working on something you loved. You won't regret the phone calls at 10:30 p.m. with colleagues who shared your passion. You won't regret giving your all to something that mattered to you. You'll regret the times you held back, the times you calculated your effort, the times you watched the clock instead of following your passion, the times you chose the efficient path over the meaningful one. So here's what I want to leave you with today. Whether you're young or old, whether you're in your dream job or just getting by, whether you found your calling or you're still searching, stop optimizing, stop calculating, stop asking what's the minimum I need to do. Start asking what's the maximum I can contribute? What's the best version of this I can create? What would make me proud? Find something, anything that makes you want to stay up late, that makes you want to call someone at an unreasonable hour because you just had an idea and it can't wait. That makes you forget to look at the clock. Because that's where innovation lives, that's where meaning lives, that's where a life well lived lives, not in the efficiently optimized path, not in the calculated minimum effort, not in the carefully measured work-life balance spreadsheet, but in the passion, in the obsession, in the phone call at 10:30 p.m. that starts with, I just thought of something. Innovation doesn't come from people watching the clock. It doesn't come from people doing exactly what's required and not an ounce more. It doesn't come from people optimizing their effort like it's a scarce resource to be rationed. Innovation comes from people who call each other at 10:30 p.m. because they just had a new idea and it can't wait until morning. From people who forget what time it is because they're so absorbed in what they're creating. From people who care so deeply about their work that the boundary between work and life becomes irrelevant. That's the secret. That's always been the secret, and it always will be. So my question to you is simple. What are you passionate enough about to make that call? What matters enough to you that you'd lose track of time working on it? Find that thing. Chase that thing. Give everything you have to that thing. Because in the end, the innovation that changes the world, the work that actually matters, it comes from people who care so much they can't stop, who are so consumed by the possibilities that they'll call you at 10:30 at night just to share an idea. Be one of those people. The world needs more of them, and you'll never regret becoming one.